On December 17, Odablock announced a hardcore Ironman tournament with a prize pool of $7,500 that would take place just 3 days later. The rules were pretty simple. You made a fresh level 3 hardcore Ironman, and after 48 hours, you would do 1v1 fights, and the winner took the entire prize pool. Your account could not go past 70 combat, and if you died, you were disqualified. You were not allowed to play Last Man Standing or boost TOB, and if you somehow managed to get bruised somehow, you weren't allowed to use them anyway. These rules were also subject to change anytime before the event, and there were a total of 50 slots, most of which would be given away at random from his chat. He was allowing content creators to reserve a spot, and although I only have 8,000 subs, there was still a chance I could reserve a spot. I had Ditter PMO, who was the organizer of the event, and Odablock himself finally responded saying that those spots were reserved for actual content creators. I was also permanently banned from his Twitch chat, which made it a bit difficult to win a role. Ditter did get Mo to unban me last minute, so I had a chance of winning a role. Problem was, there were only 40 slots available, thousands of people entering, and sub luck was turned up to 10 times. Despite all of that, this happened.
Thank you, Loco Milk. Let me rolling. Maz RS, congratulations, my brother. Do you want a spot in the tournament, or should I re-roll you?
I was officially in the tournament. There was just one issue, and that was I had no expectation of actually getting in. That means I had no plan ready, and I had already been up for hours, and I just got locked into another 48-hour commitment. Two of my friends managed to get in as well, one being 92, who was in my group Hardcore Ironman team, and the other being Sleepy, who was an XDMM winner. We worked together to come up with the strategy and also agreed to split the money if one of us ended up winning. After some planning, it seemed like the best route to take was just to go for the range tank build. It had the highest DPS, and the majority of the gear was pretty easily obtainable at a low level. The only part that was questionable was what weapon we were going to use, which I was still undecided on. And just like that, after a few minutes of planning, the tournament began. The plan that I had was pretty simple. I was going to start off by doing the Lost Tribe requirements, and then get 10k from the Stronghold and start training for 28 range, since it was a requirement for the bow and crossbow anyway. After I got 28 range for the dual crossbow, I went and got 17 mining, 13 thieving, 13 agility, and did the Lost Tribe. After that, I just went back to Sandcrafts to continue training while I planned out the rest of my 48-hour route. I needed to find a short-term solution for GP, as I would need bolts to train, and I also needed money for rune items and Defied for the final. That's when I decided I would go ahead and pick up steel plate bodies, and when I say pick up steel plate bodies, I mean a lot of steel plate bodies. And that's exactly what I did. I picked up a whopping 300 steel plate bodies from the wilderness, and I sold them to the Varrock armor shop, and that got me way over 300k. As far as I was concerned at this point, I had enough money for the entire tournament, and even after buying 10,000 bone bolts, I still had around 300k GP left. From there, I got 32 quest points by knocking out some very short, easy quests, and I did Dragon Slayer 1, and that gave me access to full green Defied from the shop, as well as a big boost to my defense level. There is one crucial armor slot that you can't buy from the shops, and that is a kite shield. So I need to get a rune kite shield from a drop from Ice Trolls. The only problem was that in order to get access to Ice Trolls, I needed to start the Fermic Isles. But in order to start the Fermic Isles, I first need to finish the Fermic Trials. In order to finish the Fermic Trials, I had to kill the warrior guy during the quest. In order to kill the warrior guy during the quest, I needed better combat stats, in particular melee stats, and access to recoil rings. And in order to get better stats, I should probably complete Waterfall because it was the best way to get my melee stats up. In order to get recoil rings, I needed 20 crafting and some gold bars. In order to get gold bars, I needed to telegrab it from the rock basement, which meant I needed to get my magic level up. But that wasn't it. I also needed a raw shark for the actual quest itself, and the only way to get that was to buy it from the shop in Canifis, which means I had to do Pierce and Peril, and that means I had to do Restless Ghost as well. So it was just a long chain of things, and that is exactly where my next 3 hours went. I got my magic level up at Blue Dragons because why not? They drop dragon bones, and that would help towards 44 prayer. I also got my crafting by hopping at charter ships and glass blowing molten glass. And a few quests and 61 attempts to get a liar later, I finally unlocked Ice Trolls, only for it to take me another 260 kills for the rune kite. I did also end up getting 2 granite shields along the way, but I didn't stop there because I didn't know if I had time to get 50 strength to use it. It also turns out that I wasn't as unlucky as I thought on the rune kite, because even though it's 1 in 64, apparently only one of the 3 trolls that I was killing actually had the ability to drop it, and I only found that out after the fact. With the rune kite out of the way, it was time to figure out what I was going to do for my main weapon. The rune crossbow from the crazy archaeologist with runite bolts from Soul Wars was probably the best DPS that you can achieve in the time frame that we had. But there was an uncertainty of whether or not there would be enough time to get 500 total on top of training all the stats for the finale. And without Soul Wars, the next best option for bolts would be Mithril bolts, which is significantly weaker. That's when I considered obsidian rings. They were the equivalent of a rune crossbow with adamant bolts, and after doing some calcs, it seemed it would take me around 400 obsidian rings to last all of the 1v1 fights, meaning it would cost me around 1.6 mil in raw GP to buy all the rings if I were to sell Chaos Runes for Tokul. That would definitely be possible through revs, but it just did not seem worth the time. That was when I was introduced to a method of boosting Tokul from the Tazar fight pits. There was a video explaining the method by Verf, but in short, the winner of the Tazar fight pits gets 1 Tokul per combat level of each player that dies in their round. Meaning if 20 level 100s die, that would give a total of 2,000 Tokul per round, or around 5 obsidian rings. The rounds were 90 seconds if you did them perfectly and everyone died instantly, and it would take a bit over 3 hours to get enough rings for me to feel comfortable in the 1v1s. But realistically, it would take probably a bit longer since the people that I would have doing it would make mistakes and slow it down by a great deal. It's also worth noting that the rune crossbow would take way less time to get on average and is stronger than the rings if you have rune bolt. But like I said before, with the uncertainty around being able to hit 500 total in time or possibly going dry on the crossbow, this seemed like a safer option since it required no RNG. And then with the help of Tata, Ditter, Abyss, and Eliop's communities, I managed to get enough people to help me do the Tazar fight pits method. And after several hours, I managed to get to 161k Tokul, which would net me plenty of rings for the final. That was until I got notified by Mo, the organizer of the event, and he pinged everyone in the tournament Discord with the message, "No boosting at fight pits for an unfair advantage," and referenced me in particular for doing it. Remember that thing about how rules are subject to change anytime before the event? Well, I guess that got thrown out the window, and the rules got updated mid-event. There was nothing indicating that it was against the rules of the tournament beforehand, so there was no reason for me to think it wasn't allowed. It was a legitimate method that Verf used in his Iron Man series, and it was already slower than getting a rune crossbow on average. So having gotten enough Tokul at this point, I messaged Mo saying, "Hey, I have enough Tokul, I got it before the rule changed, and I tried to prove that I didn't boost anymore because I already had enough." And in response, he pretty much just told me I couldn't use half the Tokul I earned, and I had to prove it by having at least 80,000 left by the end of the tournament. Which I didn't really have a choice, I just had to comply or I was DQ'd. This left me in a really shit situation because it completely screwed me over. On one hand, I now have 200 out of 400 rings, which is not enough for the 1v1s, so it's pretty much useless unless I get the other 200, or I have to go ahead and start grinding the rune crossbow and I'm down 4 hours in a 48-hour tournament. So either way, I was fucked. So after doing a bit of deliberation, I decided I'm going to go ahead and try to buy the other 200 rings using GP, which would cost around 800,000 gold. Originally, I got a lot of money for some steel plates so I could buy rune later on, but after running some DPS calcs, it seems like camping green Defied was going to be just as good as camping rune in the 1v1s. And the main reason for that is because you can't armor switch, since you're forced to one-tick flick because prayer pots are scarce, and also you don't really want to waste slots getting prayer pots, so it was just better to camp one armor style and just pray flick. So after doing that math, I decided I'm going to go ahead and camp the green Defied and save the money by not having to buy full rune. So at this point, I had around 400k GP, and that came mainly from the steel plate bodies and also random alchables that I got from like ice trolls and other NPCs while training. I had future plans to kill temple spiders for grubby keys, which also dropped a bunch of alchables, and I also plan on getting 57 thieving, which I would do through blackjacking to actually use the grubby keys, and that would also give me a decent bit of GP. I was undecided whether or not to just do more steel plate bodies and minimize the RNG, or just to YOLO at revs. And a friend of mine ended up giving me a pretty cool method to kill one of the high-level revs without taking any damage, but only under the condition that I wouldn't leak it and record the strat. The drop rate for the alchables was really, really good, and on average it would only take around 20 or so kills to get enough GP, especially since the ore and the rune drops that you get there could also be sold for Tokul as well. After some hesitation, I pulled the trigger and I decided to go to revs, and as you can see, I got pretty lucky there. It only took 12 KC for me to get around 300,000 GP worth of items that I could sell to the shop, and I thought that was a good point to stop because that plus all the other money I had seemed like it would be enough for 400 rings in total. Afterwards, I ended up killing over 100 green dragons in the wilderness, which I have no footage of because I'm an idiot and I never turned my recorder back on after I turned it off for revs from my friend. From there, the next goal was to unlock the grubby chest, and in order to open the grubby chest, I needed 57 thieving. These chests gave range pots and super defense pots, and that was pretty much crucial and necessity to win the only ones. I started off by thieving cake stalls to 25, fruit stalls from 25 to 42, completed the feud quest to get 45 thieving, and then blackjacked until 57. And then pretty much for the rest of the tournament, I just killed temple spiders and got a total of 7 grubby keys. I got plenty of super defense pots, but only 4 range pot doses. That meant I had only enough for 1 dose per fight, which was just enough. Shortly after, the 48 hours came to an end and the 1v1s began. It turned out I really overestimated how long it would take to get 500 total. I got 500 total myself by accident, and there was plenty of time to spare. If I had tried to focus on it in particular, I would have gotten it way faster as well. And that meant I no longer had the best weapon, because a rune crossbow with rune bolts would just beat me. And after looking up the stats of each competitor, it seemed like 3 people had rune crossbow with rune bolts. And after doing some DPS calcs, it seemed I had like 40-60 odds, like 40% chance of me winning, 60% chance of them winning. So it wasn't looking too good. So not only did I conjure up a sea of people trying to get me disqualified for breaking a rule that never existed and was added after the fact, got interrogated and forced a screen share to prove I didn't do any more boosting, got hit with passive aggressiveness by literally everybody, and got called a rat 100 times, I still had a disadvantage and was forced to waste more hours than a crossbow would have taken to get anyway. And in the end, you could have flipped their narrative any way you wanted it to. Just like they randomly banned Fight Pits for getting toe cool, they could have just banned Soul Wars for getting bolts. And the only reason I was made out to look like a cheater in front of literally everybody was because they painted the narrative and decided to DQ the thing that I was doing and not what everyone else was doing. But fortunately, for once, luck was on my side. The brackets were made and I literally had won the fucking lottery. Literally every single person in my bracket was essentially a free round. Meanwhile, every other serious competitor that I had a 40% odds against was in the top bracket, meaning I only had to get lucky one time and win a 40-60 coin flip one time in order to win the whole thing. My first fight didn't have overheads and was really easy, and I decided to just bring a crossbow to save some rings. Next up was Verf, and according to my DPS calcs, I had a huge advantage on him to the point where I wasn't worried at all. I'm not sure exactly what went wrong, but the fight lasted literally 12 minutes long, which doesn't make any sense after the numbers I ran, and I almost ran out of food against him, and he had a rune sword. The fight was so long that once again people started rallying, saying I boosted more rings, which led to me having to explain everything yet again over Discord screen share. The next fight was me versus Oda Block himself, and he was in Zami robes and I've been Blaz, and needless to say, it was pretty one-sided. The final fight was versus one of my friends, Sleepy, who, if you remember earlier, was one of the people I agreed to split with already, and we didn't really care who won. He had way better gear than I did, and in the end, it didn't end up mattering because I RNG'd the complete shit out of him. All in all, the tournament itself was fun to play. The obsidian rings were definitely a huge misplay. If I could do it all again, I would probably have skipped steel plate bodies. I would have started with blackjacking for the GP early on, and then I would have gone crazy arc for rune crossbow and done soul wars for the rune bolts. And that's even if pits were allowed next time. Anyway, it was pretty cool to win something, and although it didn't feel as great because I knew I had the inferior strat, it was nice to do it anyway and split a decent chunk of prize pool with my friends. That being said, thank you guys for watching, and see you guys next time.